The day my uncle slammed his palm on the dining room table and said nobody was selling the cabin,
Nobody
my
is
cousin
selling
Mason
this
laughed
cabin.
like the old man had finally lost his mind. Not a nervous laugh. Not the kind people use to soften a family argument. It was sharp, disrespectful, and loud enough to make my mother close her eyes. Uncle Ray, Mason said, tapping the real estate offer with 2 fingers. It's a rotting cabin in the woods. The roof leaks. The dock is half underwater. The buyer is offering more than this place will ever be worth again. My uncle did not look at the paper. He looked past us through my grandmother's dining room window, toward the line of pine trees behind the house. It was late October, and the wind was dragging dead leaves across the yard like it wanted to bury something. When Uncle Ray finally spoke, his voice was low. That cabin does not get sold. My Aunt Carol threw her hands up. My mother sighed. Mason leaned back in his chair with that smirk he wore whenever he thought he had the winning argument. Everyone in the family had already decided what this was. Uncle Ray was stubborn. Uncle Ray was sentimental. Uncle Ray had spent too many years alone fixing things nobody asked him to fix. He had no wife, no kids, and apparently no understanding that the rest of us had bills. The cabin sat on 20 acres beside Blackwater Lake, land my grandparents had bought in the 70s. For most of my childhood, it was where we spent summer weekends, catching bluegill off the dock, burning marshmallows in the fire pit, and signing the old guest book my grandmother kept on the kitchen table. But after Grandpa died and Grandma got sick, people stopped going. The place became a burden, or at least that was what everyone kept saying. The developer wanted to tear it down and build vacation rentals. The offer would have helped all of us. My aunt needed money for medical bills. My mother's roof had started leaking. Mason had debts he pretended were business investments. And me? I was not rich enough to turn my nose up at an inheritance. But Uncle Ray sat there like the cabin was not property, like it was a person. Mason finally said, "Unless you're hiding something out there." The room changed. Uncle Ray stood so fast his chair scraped across the floor. "You stay out of that cabin," he said. No one spoke for a second. Then Mason laughed again, quieter this time. That was the mistake. Because 2 days later, I was in the passenger seat of Mason's truck, driving up the old gravel road toward Blackwater Lake with a spare key in his cup holder, and guilt already crawling through my stomach. He said we were just checking the condition before the appraiser came. He said the cabin belonged to the family, not just Uncle Ray. He said if Ray was hiding something, we had a right to know. I told myself he was right. But when we reached the cabin, I had the strange feeling that we were not walking into an abandoned place. We were walking into a place someone was protecting. The cabin looked older than I remembered. The cedar siding had gone dark from years of weather. The green shutters were faded. The porch sagged a little on the left, and the rusted metal sign beside the steps still read Miller Cabin, 1978. But inside it was not dusty. That was the first thing I noticed. There was fresh firewood stacked beside the stone fireplace. The quilts were folded neatly at the foot of the bunks. A battery lantern sat on the counter. The old cast iron skillet was clean. Someone had swept the floor. Mason saw it too. "I knew it," he whispered. "He's using this place for something." We searched the bedrooms first. There was nothing strange. Fishing rods, board games, extra blankets, a few old family photos, my grandmother's chipped blue mugs hanging from hooks over the sink. Then Mason opened the drawer under the kitchen bench and pulled out a thick leather-bound book. The guest book. For 1 second I smiled. I remembered that book. Grandma used to make every visitor sign it before leaving. She said a house remembered people better when their names were written down. Mason opened it like he expected to find evidence of Uncle Ray renting the place secretly for cash. The first pages were normal. Family names. Fishing weekends. My grandfather's blocky handwriting. My mother writing best July ever. My own crooked sentence from when I was 7. I caught a fish but it got away. Then around 1998 the entries changed. The handwriting became smaller. Sometimes shaky. Sometimes there were no last names. "Thank you for letting us sleep here. We left before sunrise. God bless you. Marisol and Anna." Mason stopped turning pages. I leaned closer. The next entry read, "Ray, we made it to Chicago. The kids are safe. I do not know how to repay you. T." Then another. "Thank you for the food. Thank you for not asking questions. Lila. Then. My son slept through the night for the first time in months. I forgot what quiet sounded like. Miriam. The cabin seemed to shrink around us. This was not a vacation guest book. This was a record of people passing through in the middle of emergencies. Mason flipped faster now, but his face had lost its smugness. There were dozens of entries, then hundreds. Some written in English, some in Spanish, some signed with initials. Some had children's drawings beside them. A little house, a lake, a fire, a stick figure standing by a door. Then Mason found a loose photograph tucked between the pages. It showed Uncle Ray standing on the cabin porch, maybe 15 years younger, wearing his old work jacket. Beside him was a woman holding a little girl in a purple coat. The girl had one missing front tooth and a smile that looked too big for someone who had clearly been through something terrible. On the back, someone had written, Lily, age 6. First night free. My mouth went dry. Before either of us could speak, tires crunched on the gravel outside. Uncle Ray stepped into the doorway 10 seconds later. He did not yell. That made it worse. He looked at the open guest book in Mason's hands, then at the photograph on the table, and something in his face collapsed. I told you to stay out, he said. Mason held up the book, but his voice was not as confident anymore. Who were these people? Uncle Ray closed the door behind him. The wind pushed against the cabin walls, and for a long moment, the place creaked around us like it was listening. Then my uncle took off his cap, set it on the kitchen table and said, People who had nowhere else to go. Nobody in our family had ever really understood Uncle Ray. He was my grandmother's youngest son, the quiet one, the one who fixed gutters before anyone asked, brought firewood without staying for dinner, mailed birthday cards with $20 bills inside, and disappeared before people could thank him. When I was young, I thought he did not like people. Sitting in that cabin with the guest book open between us, I realized maybe he cared about people so much it had worn him down. He told us the first woman came in the winter of 1998. She had shown up at his repair shop with a split lip, 2 children in the back seat, and no money for a motel. She was not asking for charity. She asked if he knew anywhere she could park her car for one night where her husband would not find her. Uncle Ray brought her to the cabin. He gave her a key, groceries, blankets, and a phone number for a retired deputy he trusted. She left before sunrise and wrote the first message in the book. After that, word spread quietly. Not online. Not through signs. Through church secretaries, nurses, school counselors, legal aid volunteers, and one sheriff's deputy who knew which families were in danger before anyone else did. The cabin became a place people could disappear for a night. Sometimes 2. Sometimes long enough to get to a shelter, a bus station, a court hearing, or a relative 3 states away. Mostly mothers with kids, Uncle Ray said. Sometimes teenagers. Sometimes old folks whose families had cleaned out their accounts. He did not have to. For 25 years my uncle had paid for repairs, taxes, firewood, groceries, gas cards, bus tickets, prepaid phones, and locks out of his own pocket. We had called him stubborn because he never explained himself. We had called him selfish because we only saw what the property was worth to us. The guest book showed what it had been worth to strangers. Mason kept turning pages slower now. One entry read, Ray, she started school today. She still talks about the pancakes. Another said, I was going to go back to him. One night here changed my mind. Then, if anyone ever asks, you never saw us. You gave my daughter a chance to live. Under that was a child's handwriting. Thank you, cabin. I touched the page without thinking. Uncle Ray saw me looking at it. That was Lily, he said. The girl in the photograph. He told us her mother, Dana, arrived during a storm with no shoes, a broken wrist, and Lily asleep in the back seat. They stayed 3 nights. Ray helped get them to a safe house in Illinois. A week later, the man they were running from showed up at Ray's repair shop. He knew I helped, Uncle Ray said quietly. I still don't know how. The police got involved. Dana and Lily were relocated. The man was arrested months later for something unrelated. But Uncle Ray shut the cabin down for nearly 2 years because he thought he had put people in danger. Then a letter arrived. It was from Lily. She had drawn the cabin in crayon, with smoke coming from the chimney and a yellow moon over the lake. Under the picture, she wrote. I was scared, but the cabin was warm. So I opened it again, Uncle Ray said. His voice broke on the last word. That was why he refused to sell. Not because he wanted control. Not because he was trapped in the past. Because for him, selling the cabin meant destroying the one place where his quiet life had done something that mattered. But truth does not erase money problems. That was the cruel part. The deed did not belong to Uncle Ray alone. It belonged to the family trust after Grandma died. The buyer's offer was real. The taxes were real. The repairs were real. My aunt's hospital bills were real. Mason's debts were real, even if he had made half of them worse with bad choices. So the family split. At the next meeting, Mason said the guest book was sad, but it did not change ownership. Aunt Carol cried and said she felt terrible, but feelings would not pay for surgery. My mother said she loved Ray, but we had to be practical. The cabin could not survive on secrets and guilt. Uncle Ray did not fight the way I expected. He just got quieter. That scared me more than yelling. So I did the one thing nobody else had done. I read the entire guest book. Not as gossip. Not as family drama. As evidence. There were 143 entries after 1998. Some had first names. Some mentioned towns. Some mentioned churches, legal aid offices, nurses, shelters, court dates, bus stations. I made a spreadsheet at Grandma's dining room table with dates, names, clues, and locations. Mason found me there late one night. You're really doing all this? He asked. I'm trying to find out what this place actually is, I said. It's a cabin. No, I said, looking down at the pages. It's a witness. That word changed everything for me. The next morning, I called a legal aid office mentioned in 3 different entries. When I said Uncle Ray's name, the receptionist got quiet. Then she transferred me to a woman named Joanne. When I told Joanne the family was considering selling the cabin, she said, "Please don't sign anything until we talk." 2 days later, she arrived at Blackwater Lake with a folder under one arm. She was in her 60s, sharp-eyed, and not sentimental in the way I expected. She did not romanticize the cabin. She inspected the locks, the windows, the driveway, the sightlines from the road. Then she sat at the kitchen table and opened her folder. She knew about the place. Not officially. Not advertised. But for years, her office had quietly contacted Ray when every shelter bed was full, and someone needed one safe night outside the system. He filled a gap, Joanne said, that everybody knew existed and nobody had money to fix. Then she told us something none of us expected. There might be a way to preserve it. If the family agreed, the cabin could be placed into a charitable trust or partnered with a nonprofit. Legal aid could help with procedures and liability. A local contractor might donate labor. Grants could cover repairs. The family would not get the developer's payout, but the property could remain protected and useful. Mason hated that immediately. So we give up the money and inherit paperwork, he said. Joanne did not argue. She simply opened another folder. Inside were letters. Not guest book entries. Letters people had sent to legal aid, shelters, and sometimes directly to Uncle Ray. Updates. Thank yous. Graduation photos. Christmas cards. Children who had slept in that cabin were adults now. Some had jobs. Some had families. Some had college degrees. Some had become counselors, nurses, teachers. Then Joanne handed my uncle one letter. He looked at it and froze. It's from Lily, Joanne said. Uncle Ray's hand shook as he opened it. Lily was grown now. She was a nurse. Her letter said, I learned to help people because someone helped us before it was safe to ask. My mother started crying first. Then Aunt Carol. Even Mason stopped talking. But the real turning point came at the next family meeting, when Uncle Ray walked in carrying an old shoebox. He set it on the table and said, I wasn't going to show you this. Inside were receipts. Decades of them. Roof repairs. Heating oil. Plumbing parts. Blankets. Groceries. Gas cards. Bus tickets. Prepaid phones. Filing fees for protective orders. Property taxes. Lock replacements. Medicine. Baby formula. My uncle had spent almost everything he had keeping that cabin alive for people who could never repay him. Mason picked up one receipt and frowned. This is from last winter. Uncle Ray looked at the table. I thought you said nobody stayed there anymore, Mason said. I said I wasn't renting it, Ray answered. The room went silent. Someone had been there 3 months earlier. A mother and 2 kids. That was why the beds were clean. That was why the firewood was fresh. That was why Uncle Ray panicked at the idea of appraisers and developers walking through without warning. The cabin was not just part of the past. It was still saving people. That changed the argument. Not instantly. Families do not transform in one speech. Mason still wanted money. Aunt Carol still worried about medical bills. My mother still asked hard questions about taxes, insurance, and what would happen if something went wrong. But now we were not deciding whether to sell an old building. We were deciding whether we had the courage to continue what Grandma and Uncle Ray had quietly started. In the end, the guest book became the proof. Joanne helped contact people who were safe to speak. Some sent statements. Some sent donations. Some came in person. One woman drove 6 hours with her teenage son just to stand on the porch and say, "If this place had not been here, I would not be here." That was the day Mason stopped pushing to sell. He stood near the dock afterward, hands in his pockets, staring at the black water. "I thought he just wanted to control us," he said. I looked back at the cabin, where Uncle Ray was helping Joanne measure the porch steps for repairs. I think he was carrying something we were too busy to notice. The developer's offer expired. For once, nobody tried to revive it. Instead, we formed the Miller Cabin Trust. The family kept the land, but the cabin was protected from sale. Legal aid helped create safety rules. A local contractor donated labor for the roof. A church group supplied blankets and food. A retired deputy helped with security procedures so Uncle Ray no longer had to carry the risk alone. And the guest book stayed on the kitchen table. A new one sat beside it. On the first page, Uncle Ray wrote one sentence. "For anyone who needs one safe night." Months later, we held a small gathering at the cabin. Uncle Ray refused to call it a ceremony. He said ceremonies were for people who liked attention, and he had avoided attention successfully for 71 years. But people came anyway. Family. Volunteers. Joanne from legal aid. A few people who had once written their names in the old book. Lily came too. She was taller than I expected, with kind eyes and a purple scarf. When she saw Uncle Ray, she did not speak at first. She just hugged him. He stood stiff for half a second, like he had forgotten what to do with gratitude when it came at him directly. Then his shoulders folded, and he hugged her back. "I became a nurse," she told him. "I heard," he said. "You helped me become someone who helps." Uncle Ray looked away toward the lake. That was the closest I ever saw him come to crying in public. Before we left, Mason picked up the new guest book. He stared at the blank page for a long time. Then he wrote under Uncle Ray's sentence, "I was wrong about this place." He closed the book and walked outside without saying anything. The cabin still looks old. The porch still complains under your feet. The wind still moves through the pines at night. The lake still turns black after sunset. But now, when I stand in that kitchen and see the guest book on the table, I do not see a piece of property we almost sold. I see proof. Proof that some secrets are not scandals. Some secrets are sacrifices. My uncle refused to sell the cabin because he was not protecting wood, land, or memories. He was protecting every frightened person who had ever walked through that door. Every child who had slept under those quilts. Every name written by a shaking hand in the middle of the night. For years we asked why he cared so much about an old cabin. The guest book answered us. Because to us it was inheritance. To someone else it had been the first safe place they ever found. And sometimes the most valuable property a family owns is not the land people want to buy. It is the one place where someone desperate once realized they were not alone.